I'm Mike Lash. I live here in Atlanta with my 3 kids and wife, and have the honor of telling my story today. So I live in the Upper West Side of Atlanta, and I'm currently work for CBRE in commercial real estate on their IT data center department. And so a little bit of background of who I am. I'm originally from California. I grew up in a fatherless home, my brother and I. And my mom moved my brother and I back to Ohio, where she's from. She wanted to raise us there. Grew up in a pretty religious household in Ohio. And I remember thinking, you know, I believe that there's a God, but I just don't want anything to do with him. So when I moved to Seattle for college, I lived my own lifestyle. And while I was out in college, I came to Christ. And I just remember just realizing that God is going to forgive the unforgivable in me, and I wanted that in my life. And so I gave my life to Christ when I was out there. And fast forward, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and got plugged into North Point Church here in Atlanta, and now we go to Passion City Church. Well, about 2.5 years ago, my wife and I were coming back from a family vacation, and I was going to start a new job in commercial real estate the very next day. And while we were coming back, it was a Sunday. We got to our house and we were unpacking, and there was a knock on the door. The doorbell rang, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Are we expecting anybody?" She said, "No." And so we went and I opened the door, and it was a couple of kids, and they had the story that their car broke down. They just moved into the neighborhood, and they wanted to borrow a jack. And I told them, "Hey guys, I don't have a jack, but what I do have is a car. I'm happy to give you a ride wherever you want to go." And at that moment, one of the kids pulled out a gun, and he pointed at my head. And I put my hands up and I said, "Hey, this is a Christian household. We don't have much, but what we do have, I'm happy to give you." And that's when he said, "Well, give me your car." And so I turned around to get the keys, but then I knew in my heart I can't break eye contact with this kid, and I knew I couldn't let him in the house because my wife and kids were in there. And so I said, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I can't let you in this house." And he started counting down. He said, "If you don't move, I'm going to shoot you." So he started counting down: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then he pulled the trigger, but luckily he moved the gun down to my leg. And so he shot me in the leg. I went down, I came back up, and then he shot me in the right leg. But this time, instead of going through and through, it hit my femoral vein and my femur, and shattered my femur. So I went down, they came into the house, they shot at my wife twice, and just stole a bunch of stuff. But luckily, by the grace of God, my wife wasn't harmed. It was simply, he just simply wanted her phone. So he grabbed the phone and they all exited. And I remember sitting there and bleeding out, and just how quiet it was. And I remember thinking, "Okay, God, this is it. This is the time I get to meet you." And I remember being scared, but not the kind of scared you get when you're about to die, I suppose, but the same feeling I had when I was about to watch my wife walk down the aisle. It was this anticipation and this excitement of and being terrified, all mixed into one. And I remember, okay, I have to make sure I forgive everybody in my life. So I went down the list, and then I remember getting to these boys, and I said, "Lord, I have to forgive these boys. You forgave the unforgivable in me. I have to forgive them for what they did." And so I asked God to forgive them. And then I remember wrestling a little bit with God and saying, "Okay, if it's possible, keep me here. I would love to be the dad I never had for my kids, and be the husband I want for my wife." And at that moment, I heard an ambulance, or I heard a siren, and I knew that siren was for me. And sure enough, it was 2 police officers. They came. First police officer broke all protocol and went straight to me, found my femoral vein, plugged it with his bare hands, and kept it until a tourniquet could be made by the other officer, who happened to know how to make tourniquets, as he was in the military for years. And so because of their quick efforts, The ambulance driver who showed up 6 minutes later said, "You would have bled out, and if those two officers wouldn't have done what they did in about 6 minutes." And so I knew that day God answered my prayer by saving my life. And so now our faith means more now to us than it did before. Just this reality that God is good in spite of evil. God is good in spite of pain, and putting your faith in Him, even when it doesn't look like it's as clear as it did when things were going your way, it matters a lot. And so trusting in Him and having Him as our source of strength in spite of the pain, in spite of the storm, is what we live for. And so the good news is all the boys were caught that day. They all pled guilty, and we've actually connected with some of the family members from their community, and we've heard about the things that are happening in our inner city and how we could potentially get involved. And so we know the story's not done yet, that what was meant for evil, God will use for good. And so we're really, really excited to see what God will use and continue to use this story.